Captain Lisa Hartwell stood on the bridge of her ship, looking at the screen that showed empty space filled with distant stars. Her crew worked quietly at their stations, checking readings and making notes about the strange energy patterns they had found near the edge of the solar system. The science vessel Endeavour was not built for fighting. It carried no heavy weapons, no thick armor plating, and no soldiers ready for battle. Lisa preferred it that way. She had joined the space service to explore new worlds and meet alien races, not to fight wars. The communication officer turned toward her with worry written across his face. "Captain, we're getting a distress signal from the mining colony on Kepler 442b. Lisa walked over to his station, put it through the speakers. The message crackled with static, but the words were clear enough to make everyone on the bridge stop what they were doing. "This is Colony Commander Jake Roberts on Kepler 442b. Xanthari invasion fleet detected on long-range sensors. 3 Dreadnought-class warships approaching our position. They have brought the Warbeast with them. Repeat, the Xanthari have deployed Cathara. Colony evacuation is not possible due to civilian population size. We have no military defenses. Requesting immediate assistance from any Earth vessels in the area." The bridge fell silent. Every person in the galaxy knew about the Warbeast. Every child learned about it in school, and every adult had nightmares about it. For 300 years, the creature called Cathara had been the Xanthari Empire's ultimate weapon. No force in known space had ever defeated it in battle. Dr. Alan Brooks, the ship's expert on alien lifeforms, moved closer to Lisa. His face looked pale under the bridge lights. "Captain, if the Xanthari have brought Cathara to that colony, those people don't stand a chance." Lisa had read the reports. She knew the stories that spacers told in bars across the galaxy. The Altarians had tried to stop the Warbeast with their most powerful plasma cannons. The creature had absorbed the energy blasts and used them to make itself stronger. The mechanical race called the Synthetics had attempted to hack into its brain with their best computer viruses. They discovered that Cathara had no electronic parts to attack. The telepathic Mindari had sent their strongest psychics to control its thoughts. 3 of them had gone insane just from touching the edge of its alien mind. "How long until the Xanthari reach the colony?" Lisa asked. The navigation officer checked his instruments. "At their current speed, approximately 6 hours, Captain." Lisa looked at the tactical display. The mining colony on Kepler 442b housed nearly 50,000 civilians. Miners, their families, support staff, and researchers who studied the planet's unusual crystal formations. They had no warships, no planetary defense systems, and no way to evacuate that many people before the Xanthari arrived. "Set course for Kepler 442b, maximum warp speed," Lisa ordered. Her first officer, Commander Pete Nash, stepped beside her. "Captain, with respect, what can we do against 3 Xanthari dreadnoughts and the Warbeast? The Endeavour is a science vessel. We have only basic defensive shields and no offensive weapons beyond mining lasers." Lisa knew he was right. The Xanthari dreadnoughts were each 3 times the size of her ship. Their weapons could punch through the Endeavour's shields in seconds. And then there was Cathara itself. The creature stood 12 feet tall, and its body was covered in natural armor that looked like living crystal. Energy flowed through its veins like liquid lightning. Its claws could tear through starship hulls as easily as paper. When it roared, the sound could be heard across space itself. "Send a priority message to Earth Command," Lisa said. "Tell them about the situation. If we don't make it back, they need to know what happened here." Dr. Brooks moved to his science station and began pulling up files on his computer. "Captain, I've been studying the old reports about encounters with Cathara. Something has always bothered me about them." "What do you mean?" Brooks highlighted sections of text on his screen. "Look at this. Every single attempt to deal with the Warbeast has used the same approach. Military force, advanced technology, or mental control. The Altarians tried to blast it. The Synthetics tried to reprogram it. The Mindari tried to dominate its mind. But what if we're thinking about this problem in the wrong way?" Lisa moved closer to look at the data. "Go on. What if Cathara isn't really a weapon at all? What if it's something else entirely?" The ship shuddered slightly as it jumped to warp speed, heading toward a confrontation that seemed impossible to win. Lisa studied the images on Brooks's screen. Pictures of the Warbeast taken by long-range sensors during various battles over the centuries. In every image, the creature looked fierce and terrible. Its eyes glowed with inner fire. Its claws dripped with energy. Its mouth was open in what looked like a roar of rage. But now that Brooks had pointed it out, Lisa began to see something else in those pictures. Something that no one had noticed before because they were too busy being afraid. In the creature's posture, in the way it held its massive head, in the slight slump of its shoulders when it thought no one was watching. "You think it's a prisoner?" Lisa said quietly. Brooks nodded. "I think the Zenthari found something ancient and powerful, and they've been using it as a slave for 300 years. But slaves don't always want to serve their masters." The Endeavor continued through space at maximum speed, racing toward a battle that would change everything. Behind them, the stars shifted and blurred as the warp drive bent space around their small ship. Ahead of them, 3 massive Zenthari warships waited in orbit around a defenseless world, and between those ships floated the most feared creature in the galaxy. But perhaps, Lisa thought as she watched the stars stream past, fear was exactly the wrong way to think about Kithara. Perhaps it was time to try something that no one in 3 centuries had thought to attempt. Perhaps it was time to try understanding instead of fighting. Jake Martinez pressed his face against the cool glass of the observation deck window. At 12 years old, he was smaller than most of the adults on the ship, but he could still see everything happening in the space around them. His parents were both scientists who studied alien animals, and they were traveling to a new research station when the emergency call came in. Now their peaceful journey had turned into something much more dangerous. Jake was different from other kids his age. While his classmates back on Earth played video games and watched movies, Jake spent his time in the ship's science labs. He liked to sit quietly near the containers that held various alien creatures the scientists were studying. The adults always said he had a gift for understanding animals, but Jake knew it was more than that. He could feel what the creatures were feeling. He could sense their fear, their hunger, their loneliness. Sometimes he even thought he could talk to them, though not with words. The ship dropped out of warp speed with a gentle shudder. Through the window, Jake could see 3 massive Zenthari warships hanging in space like giant metal sharks. Their dark hulls were covered with weapon ports and sensor arrays. Each ship was big enough to hold thousands of soldiers. But Jake's attention was drawn to something else floating between the warships, the Warbeast. Even from this distance, Jake could see that the creature was huge. It floated inside some kind of energy cage that sparkled with electricity. The beast's body was covered in what looked like living crystal that caught and reflected the light from the nearby star. But as Jake watched, he noticed something that made his stomach feel sick. The creature wasn't moving like a wild animal ready to attack. It hung limp in the energy cage, its massive head drooping down toward its chest. Its arms floated at its sides like it was too tired to lift them. Around its thick neck, Jake could just barely make out some kind of metal collar that pulsed with the same energy as the cage. "Mom," Jake called to Dr. Patricia Martinez, who had just entered the observation deck. "Come look at this." His mother walked over to the window and followed his gaze toward the Zenthari ships. She had learned over the years to pay attention when Jake pointed out something about an alien creature. Her son seemed to understand non-human minds in ways that even trained scientists couldn't explain. "What do you see, honey?" she asked. Jake pointed at the Warbeast. "It's not angry. It's sad. Really, really sad." Patricia looked more carefully at the creature floating in the distance. She had read all the reports about Kithara. Every description called it a monster, a weapon of destruction, a creature that lived only to destroy and kill. But now, seeing it through her son's eyes, she began to notice details that the military reports had never mentioned. The way the creature's shoulders sagged, the way its head hung down like it was ashamed of something, the way it didn't struggle against the energy cage even though its massive strength should have been able to break free. "Jake, are you sure? Everyone says that creature is the most dangerous being in the galaxy." Jake pressed both hands against the window glass. "It doesn't want to hurt anyone, Mom. Someone is making it hurt people. That collar thing around its neck, it's doing something bad to it. The ship's communication system crackled to life. Captain Hartwell's voice echoed through every deck. All crew to battle stations. The Zenthari are demanding our immediate surrender. They're charging their weapons and preparing to release the Warbeast. Other passengers began to panic. Jake could hear people running in the corridors outside, shouting orders and asking questions. But he didn't move from the window. He kept staring at the creature in the energy cage, and somehow, impossibly, he felt like it was looking back at him. The feeling was strange and powerful. Jake had connected with alien animals before, but this was different. The mind he was touching wasn't really an animal mind at all. It was more like a person's mind, but older than anything Jake had ever experienced. Ancient and tired and filled with pain that went back hundreds of years, images began to flash through Jake's thoughts. He saw a beautiful world covered with crystal forests that sang in the wind. He saw tall, graceful beings who looked like the Warbeast but smaller and more elegant. He saw cities made of living stone that grew from the ground like plants, and then he saw fire and destruction as invaders came from the sky. The Zenthari had found this creature sleeping in the ruins of its dead world. They had put the control collar around its neck and forced it to become their weapon. For 300 years they had used pain and electric shocks to make it fight their battles. The creature had tried to resist at first, but the torture never stopped. Eventually it had given up trying to be free. Jake felt tears running down his cheeks. The images in his mind were so sad and terrible that he could barely stand them, but he also felt something else, a tiny spark of hope that hadn't been completely destroyed by centuries of slavery. "Mom," Jake whispered, "I need to help it." Patricia knelt down beside her son. She could see the pain in his eyes, and she knew he was experiencing something beyond normal human understanding. "Jake, that creature is too far away. And even if we could reach it somehow, it's incredibly dangerous." "No, it's not," Jake said firmly. "It's just hurt and scared and tired. It's been hurt for so long that it forgot who it used to be. But I can still feel the real person inside." Through the window they watched as the energy cage around the Warbeast began to fade. The creature's head lifted slowly, and its crystal armor began to glow brighter. The control collar around its neck pulsed faster, sending waves of pain through its body to force it into battle mode. But for just a moment before the artificial rage took over, the creature turned its massive head toward the small human ship. Its eyes, ancient and intelligent, seemed to focus directly on the observation deck window where Jake stood. Jake felt the connection grow stronger. Across the empty space between their ship and the Warbeast, two very different minds touched each other. One was young and hopeful and filled with compassion. The other was old and tired and had forgotten how to hope. But in that brief contact, something passed between them. The Warbeast felt something it hadn't experienced in 3 centuries. Understanding. Someone finally saw past the weapon and the monster to the person trapped inside. Jake wiped his eyes and looked at his mother with determination. "I'm going to talk to it, Mom. Not with words, with feelings. I'm going to remind it who it really is." Commander Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, his 4 arms moving across different control panels at the same time. He was Zenthari, which meant his body looked like a giant insect that walked on 2 legs. His people had evolved from creatures that lived in hives, and they still thought like a group mind even though each individual could think for himself. This made them excellent soldiers because they could work together without needing to talk to each other. The Zenthari had been conquering other worlds for over 500 years. They had better weapons than most races, stronger ships, and more soldiers than anyone could count. But their greatest advantage was the creature they called their ultimate weapon. For 3 centuries, Cathara had won every battle for them. No enemy had ever defeated it. No defense had ever stopped it. "The human ship refuses to surrender," reported his tactical officer, her voice clicking through the strange sounds that Zenthari used for speech. Vextar turned his large compound eyes toward the small science vessel that hung in space near their formation. Humans were still new to this part of the galaxy. Most alien races had learned to fear the Zinthari and their Warbeast, but these humans seemed either very brave or very stupid. Then we deploy Cathara as usual, Vextar clicked back. Activate the control matrix. One of his technicians pressed a series of buttons on his console. Deep in the ship's computer systems, ancient programming began to run. Signals traveled through space to the control collar around the Warbeast's neck. The collar had been built by the Zinthari's best scientists, using technology they had stolen from a dozen different alien races. It was designed to do one simple thing: cause pain. The collar sent electric shocks directly into Cathara's brain. Not enough to kill the creature, but enough to hurt it terribly. The pain was so bad that the creature would do anything to make it stop. The only way to reduce the pain was to fight, to destroy, to kill whatever target the Zinthari pointed it toward. This was how they had controlled the beast for 300 years, through constant torture. But as the control signals activated, something unexpected happened. Instead of immediately charging toward the human ship as it always did, Cathara hesitated. The creature's massive head turned toward the small science vessel, and for just a moment, its natural intelligence broke through the artificial programming. In that brief instant, Cathara felt something it had not experienced since the day the Zinthari found it sleeping in the ruins of its homeworld. Understanding. Somewhere on that little ship, someone could see past the weapon and the monster to the person trapped inside. The feeling was so surprising that Cathara almost forgot about the pain from the control collar. For 3 centuries, every living being that looked at it had seen only fear and destruction. But this was different. This felt like recognition. Aboard the Endeavor, Jake suddenly cried out and stumbled backward from the observation window. His mother caught him as he began to shake, and she could see tears streaming down his face. "Jake, what's wrong?" Patricia asked, holding her son steady. "It hurts so much," Jake whispered, his voice breaking. "They're hurting it on purpose. They've been hurting it for so long that it forgot who it used to be." Dr. Brooks looked up from his science station where he had been monitoring the Zinthari transmissions. "Captain, I'm detecting some kind of neural interference pattern. It's being broadcast from the Zinthari ships directly to the creature." Captain Hartwell moved closer to Brooks's station. "Mind control?" "Worse than that," Brooks replied, his face grim as he studied the readings. "It's torture. They're using pain to force the creature to obey them." Jake wiped his eyes and looked at his mother with a determination that seemed much too mature for a 12-year-old boy. "Mom, I need to talk to it. I need to help it remember who it really is." "Jake, that's impossible. The creature is too far away, and even if we could somehow communicate with it, you saw what the report said. It's killed thousands of people." "Not because it wanted to," Jake said firmly, "because they made it. Animals don't think in words like we do. They think in feelings and pictures and memories of things that happened to them. And that thing out there isn't really an animal anyway. It's more like a person who was forced to forget how to be themselves." Through their connection, Jake could feel more images flowing from the creature's ancient memory. He saw Cathara's people as they really were, not monsters or weapons, but guardians. They had protected their crystal world from dangers that came from space. They were peaceful by nature, using their great strength only to defend others who were weaker. But the Zinthari had found Cathara alone, the last of its kind, sleeping in a special chamber deep underground. Its people had built the chamber to keep their guardian safe while they fought a war against invaders. Cathara was supposed to wake up when the danger was over and help rebuild their civilization. Instead, it had awakened to find its world dead, its people gone, and strangers putting a control collar around its neck. The pain from the collar grew stronger, and Jake felt it like a knife in his own head. The Zinthari were increasing the torture, trying to force Cathara to attack the human ship. The creature's body began to glow brighter as energy built up in its crystal armor. Its claws extended, crackling with deadly power. But even as the artificial rage programming tried to take control, Jake could feel the real Cathara fighting back. Deep inside the creature's mind, the person it used to be was still alive, hurt, tired and nearly broken, but still there. "I can reach it," Jake told his mother. Not with the radio or any machine, with this. He put his hand over his heart. It's scared and alone, just like any hurt animal would be. But if someone shows it kindness instead of fear, maybe it can remember how to choose for itself. On the Zenthari flagship, Commander Vextar watched with growing confusion as his ultimate weapon continued to hesitate. Kethera should have already destroyed the human ship and moved on to attack the colony. Instead, the creature floated motionless in space, its energy weapons powering down instead of charging up. Increase the control signal, Vextar ordered his technicians. Maximum power. The pain from the collar became so intense that Kethera screamed, a sound that traveled across space itself and was heard on every ship in the area. But still the creature did not attack. Instead, it turned to look directly at the Zenthari flagship, and for the first time in 300 years, its own intelligence shone in its eyes instead of programmed fury. Jake felt the creature's agony, but he also felt something else, a decision being made. After centuries of slavery, Kithera was finally choosing to resist, no matter how much it hurt. The ancient guardian was remembering who it used to be. Captain Lisa Hartwell made a decision that would have gotten her court-martialed if any military officers had been watching. Instead of running away from 3 massive Zenthari warships, she ordered her small science vessel to fly closer to them. The bridge crew stared at her in shock, but they followed her orders. The Endeavor moved slowly toward the alien formation, where the most feared creature in the galaxy waited to destroy them. "Captain, are you sure about this?" Commander Nash asked quietly. "We're moving into weapons range of 3 dreadnoughts." Lisa kept her eyes on the main screen, where Kithara floated between the Zenthari ships. The creature was magnificent and terrifying at the same time. Its crystal armor caught the light from the nearby star and threw rainbow patterns across its surface. Energy crackled along its arms and legs like living lightning. But Lisa was beginning to see what Dr. Brooks and young Jake had noticed. Something was wrong with this picture. "I'm sure, Pete. If we're going to die today, at least we'll die trying something new." Jake had convinced his mother to take him to the ship's main communication room. Dr. Brooks had spent the last hour connecting different pieces of equipment together, building a transmission system that could broadcast on many different frequencies at the same time. It wouldn't carry words or voices like a normal radio. Instead, it would carry emotions, feelings, and memories. "Are you certain this will work?" Patricia asked Dr. Brooks as he made final adjustments to the equipment. Brooks shook his head. "I have no idea. We're trying something that's never been attempted before, but given our situation, conventional approaches don't seem to have much chance of success either." Through the communication room's window, they could see Kithara growing closer as the Endeavor approached the Zenthari formation. The creature was moving now, its massive body turning toward their ship. Energy was building in its claws, and its mouth opened to show teeth that could bite through metal. Jake sat down in front of the microphone that Dr. Brooks had connected to the transmission system. He closed his eyes and tried to ignore the fear that was making his heart beat fast. Everyone on the ship was depending on him, but he was just a 12-year-old kid who was good with animals. How could he possibly communicate with something so ancient and powerful? But then he felt it again, that connection he had sensed earlier. Across the empty space between the ships, Kithara's mind touched his. And what Jake found there wasn't the consciousness of a monster at all. Instead, he discovered the mind of someone who was very old and very tired. Someone who had been forced to do terrible things for so long that they had almost forgotten who they used to be. In the deepest part of Kithara's memory, Jake found images of the creature's life before the Zenthari found it. Kithara had once been a protector, not a destroyer. Its people had been peaceful builders who created beautiful cities from living crystal. When enemies came from other worlds to attack them, Kithara and others like it had defended their home. But they never attacked first, and they never killed unless there was no other choice. The Zenthari had found Kithara sleeping in a special chamber waiting for its people to wake it when the danger was over. But its people were gone, killed in a war that had ended centuries ago. Kithara had awakened alone, the last of its kind, surrounded by strangers who saw it only as a weapon to be used. Jake felt the creature's pain as if it was his own. The control collar around Kithera's neck was sending waves of agony through its body, trying to force it to attack the human ship. The programming was simple and brutal. Hurt anything that the Zenthari pointed it toward, or the pain would get worse. But Jake didn't try to fight the collar's programming. He didn't try to override the Zenthari's control systems. Instead, he did something much simpler and much more powerful. He reached out through the transmission system with his natural ability to understand alien minds, and he offered Kithera something it hadn't been given in 300 years. A choice. Through the broad-spectrum transmission, enhanced by equipment, that Dr. Brooks barely understood and powered by Jake's gift for connecting with non-human consciousness, the boy sent a single message to the ancient creature. It wasn't a command or a demand. It wasn't even really a request. It was something far more profound than any of those things. "You don't have to do this anymore," Jake whispered into the microphone. The words traveled through space on radio waves, but they carried more than just sound. They carried recognition of Kithera's pain, understanding of its loss, and acknowledgement that it was a person, not a weapon. Most importantly, they carried the simple truth that even after 3 centuries of slavery, the creature still had the right to choose its own path. Kithera stopped moving. For the first time in 300 years, the creature hung completely motionless in space. Its energy weapons powered down instead of charging up. Its claws retracted instead of extending. The artificial rage that had been programmed into its mind faded away, replaced by something the Zenthari had never expected to see: free will. The control collar around Kithera's neck continued to pulse with neural disruptors, sending waves of pain through the creature's nervous system. But somehow, impossibly, Kithera was resisting the torture. It was choosing consciousness over the artificial anger that had defined its existence for centuries. On the bridge of his flagship, Commander Vextar stared at his instruments in disbelief. Every reading showed that the control collar was working perfectly. The pain signals were at maximum strength. The neural programming was running exactly as designed. But his ultimate weapon was simply ignoring all of it. "This is impossible," he clicked to his technicians. "Increase power to the control matrix. Override all safety protocols." The technicians looked nervous as they followed his orders. The control collar had never been pushed to such extreme levels before. The amount of pain they were inflicting on Kithera should have been enough to drive any living creature insane. But Kithera endured it. The creature's massive body shook with agony, and its roar of pain could be heard throughout the solar system, but it did not attack the human ship. Instead, it turned to look directly at the Zenthari flagship, and for the first time in 3 centuries, its own personality shone through its eyes instead of programmed fury. Jake felt the creature's suffering through their connection, but he also felt something else that filled him with hope. Kithera was making a decision. After being forced to kill and destroy for hundreds of years, the ancient guardian was finally choosing to remember who it really was. The choice was costing Kithera everything. Every second of resistance brought more pain from the control collar. But the creature had heard Jake's message and it understood what the boy was offering. Not rescue, not freedom from pain, but something much more valuable. The right to choose. And Kithera chose to be itself again, no matter what the cost. What happened next would be remembered across the galaxy as the day when everything changed. The day when the most feared weapon in known space made a choice that no one had thought possible. Kithera, free to decide for itself for the first time, in 3 centuries slowly raised its massive hands toward the control collar around its neck. The ancient device had been built by the best Zenthari scientists using technology stolen from a dozen different alien races. It was designed to be unbreakable, powered by the creature's own life energy and protected by quantum shields that could stop almost any attack. But the engineers who built it had made one mistake. They never imagined that their prisoner would choose to destroy the collar even if it meant terrible pain or death. Jake felt what the creature was planning through their mental connection. "No," he whispered into the microphone. "You don't have to hurt yourself. We can find another way." But Kithera had made its decision. For 300 years, it had been forced to kill innocent people while its captors tortured it into obedience. Now finally, it could choose to be free, even if freedom came at the highest price possible. The creature's hands closed around the control collar. The device immediately began pumping massive amounts of electrical energy into Kythera's body, trying to stop it from breaking free. Warning signals flashed on the Zenthari ships as their computers detected what was happening. Commander Vextar stared at his screens in horror. "All ships, open fire on the creature. Destroy it before it can escape." But it was too late. Even as the Zenthari weapons charged up, Kythera crushed the control collar in its bare hands. The device had been designed to withstand almost any external attack, but it couldn't handle the incredible strength of the creature it was built to control. The collar shattered into 1,000 pieces that drifted away into space like dying stars. As it broke apart, massive waves of energy feedback tore through Kythera's nervous system. The creature screamed again, a sound of pure agony that was heard on every ship in the solar system. But this time, the scream carried something else along with the pain. Relief. For a few moments, Kythera floated motionless in space, its body shaking from the energy feedback. Jake could feel the creature's suffering through their connection, but he could also feel something wonderful happening. The artificial modifications that the Zenthari had made to Kythera's body were starting to reverse themselves. The harsh, aggressive edges of its crystal armor began to soften. The weapon systems that had been grafted onto its arms retracted back into its body. Patterns of soft light began to appear across its surface, not the harsh glow of a weapon, but something beautiful and peaceful. This was what Kythera really looked like. Not a monster designed for destruction, but a guardian meant to protect and defend. The Zenthari ships began to retreat. Without their ultimate weapon, they were still powerful, but they were no longer invincible. Commander Vextar had built his entire military strategy around having Kythera available for the most difficult battles. Now that strategy was worthless. "All ships, retreat to the jump point," Vextar ordered. "We will return with a full invasion fleet." But even as he gave the order, Vextar knew that everything had changed. Word would spread quickly through the galaxy that the Zenthari's ultimate weapon was gone. Worlds that had surrendered, rather than face Kythera, would start to rebel. Enemy fleets that had avoided Zenthari space would become bold. The empire that had been built on fear would begin to crumble. As the alien warships disappeared into hyperspace, Kythera approached the Endeavor one final time. But instead of attacking, the creature simply floated nearby. The patterns of light on its armor pulsed slowly, and somehow Jake understood that this was how his people had communicated, through color and light instead of sound. The message was simple, but profound. Gratitude. Through the communication system, Jake sent one more message to the ancient guardian. "Where will you go now?" The answer didn't come in words. Instead, Jake's mind was filled with images that Kythera shared with him. He saw vast clouds of gas and dust where new stars were being born. He saw empty worlds where civilizations had once lived before they were destroyed by war or disease. He saw the dark spaces between star systems where travelers might become lost or stranded. Kythera would return to what it had always been meant to be, a protector. But instead of guarding just one world, it would watch over the spaces between the stars. It would help ships in distress, stop pirates from attacking peaceful traders, and make sure that no other species suffered the way the Zenthari's victims had suffered. The creature's light patterns grew brighter for a moment, and then it turned away from the human ship. With movements that were graceful despite its enormous size, Kythera began to fly toward the edge of the solar system. Within minutes, it had disappeared among the distant stars. Captain Hartwell received a message from Earth Command an hour later. "Mission report, Endeavor. We're receiving word that Zenthari forces are withdrawing from all contested systems across this sector. How did you manage to neutralize their ultimate weapon?" Lisa looked around her bridge at the crew members who had witnessed something impossible. Then she glanced toward the communication room, where Jake Martinez was helping Dr. Brooks disconnect the equipment they had used. "We didn't neutralize anything, Command," Lisa replied. "We just reminded someone who they used to be. 6 months later, reports began to come in from across the galaxy. A cargo ship that had lost its engines in deep space was mysteriously pushed toward the nearest inhabited world. A pirate fleet attacking a colony transport suddenly found their weapons disabled by an unknown force. Explorers in the farthest reaches of space reported glimpses of a massive figure with crystal armor, watching over the void with ancient eyes. The creature that had once been called the Warbeast had remembered its true name and its real purpose. Kithara, the guardian of the deep, was protecting travelers and keeping the peace in the dark spaces where no government could reach. And in a research station orbiting a distant star, a 13-year-old boy named Jake Martinez continued his work with alien life forms. He never fully understood that he had changed the balance of power in the galaxy with 5 simple words. Words that reminded everyone, human and alien alike, that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't superior weapons or advanced technology. It was the simple recognition that every thinking being, no matter how different or how far they had fallen, still had the right to choose who they wanted to be. Jake had given Kithara back its freedom with a single message: you don't have to do this anymore. Sometimes, the greatest victories came not from fighting, but from offering hope to those who had forgotten that hope was possible.